Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we're going to be talking about trying to save Sears. A lot of folks have tried to talk about how Sears is dead, Sears is dying. Sure, we'll talk about that a little bit here and justify exactly what's going on, but I want to conclude this by strategies that Sears can actually take to maybe be able to survive their current crisis. I want to end this on a positive note. So as a quick disclaimer, just to get this out of the way, in this video I'll be mentioning several companies, Sears specifically, as well as a few other competitors. I don't actually own any of their stock. I have no holdings in them. There is a possibility that some of these retail companies could be part of one of my mutual funds that I own, but the contents of those portfolios are subject to change daily and is outside of my control. So I stand to benefit or lose nothing from this video in regards to my individual portfolio. So whatever you take away from this, know that I have no personal gain in this to see Sears survive other than just simply American nostalgia for a long-time traditional American brand and company. So when we talk about Sears, what I'm really talking about is the Sears Holding Company, known on the NASDAQ as SHLD, and that's comprised of the two separate brands of Sears that has about 651 stores, combined with the K-Mart brand that has about 624 stores. Those numbers are approximate as of about June 20th of 2017. So give or take that depending upon what's going on with retail closures that's been announced over the last year or so from Sears Holding Company. Now, Sears Holding Company actually has one other sister company, and this is comprised of the conglomeration of Sears Hometown, Sears Outlet, and Sears Hardware stores. There's also a Sears Appliance showroom that's a part of this, and that was spun off as a group in 2012. And that group is comprised of a bit over 1,000 stores, has its own separate NASDAQ ticker symbol of SHOS. Nearly 100% of the inventory in these stores is actually owned by Sears Holding, but what separates the storefronts in this corporation is that the retail space is independently owned, and from what I can understand from my reading, substantially independently operated, but Sears provides marketing, customer support, the Shop Your Way rewards points program, and point of sale merchandising, outlets, registry, technology support, and a lot of the back end. But Sears has nothing to do with the retail space, negotiations, or anything regarding the actual space as compared to their full line stores that they have more corporate control over. And these typically are found, especially the Sears Hometown ones, in locations that are smaller and may not support a full standalone or mall type Sears store. When we look across Sears Holding, there's also a handful of other brands within the portfolio. Perhaps most notably, the first two that come to mind are Craftsman and Kenmore. Craftsman tools, obviously, if you're on my channel, you've seen I've reviewed a number of Craftsman tools over the years. You've got Kenmore appliances, Die-Hard batteries. You also have the related Sears Auto Center, where you can get oil changes done on your car and other car repairs. You've got the rebranded version of that. There's at least one of these, I believe, in Texas. That's known as a Die-Hard Auto Center. You also, if you've shopped in Sears, maybe you've had someone come up and try to pester you to get a quote for a new roof or some other sort of home repair, get your ductwork cleaned. And so you got Sears Home Services. There's also the Parts Direct, so getting parts for appliances or even some tool parts you can get through Sears Parts Direct. Now, what's interesting is the Craftsman brand has actually now been sold and is no longer part of Sears Holding. Stanley Black & Decker, the owner of DeWalt, Mac Tools, and a variety of other tool brands, now owns them. And so Sears, and if you, I'll see if I put a link below for some of the details about that acquisition. Sears gets to own, maintain a number of pieces of the brand, and there's a whole phase-out agreement in terms of who owes who money over what duration of time. It's kind of complicated, but I get it. The Stanley Black & Decker wanted to protect themselves and their investment of cash into this Craftsman brand. And Sears needs the Craftsman brand perhaps to be able to help maintain future viability. So there's some careful negotiation both ways in regards to that. but it is no longer completely independently held like the other brands are part of the portfolio. Even before the Craftsman sale, Sears had a division within them known as KCD for for Kenmore, Craftsman, and Die Hard, recognizing that those are the three most notable brands within the Sears portfolio of brands and trademarks. So here's just a typical storefront of a Sears store in a mall. If you've been around in malls for years, you've probably seen this. It's interesting to see how the corporate insignia has changed, but not all malls have kept up with it. That's maybe our first sign that, things maybe aren't quite what they should be with Sears. You generally think of companies wanting to maintain very consistent branding throughout their company at all locations where the brand is located. You can see here has the older Sears logo that has a little white line running through it, whereas the new logo is just a solid blue letter with no white line and non-italicized, and it's a slightly thinner font. So as everyone knows, or especially if you've been following the markets lately, you know that Sears has been in some dire financial trouble. So let's first just try to characterize exactly what's going on, because I feel like some of the news articles just do a very poor job of trying to explain what's going on. So as of June 19th, the Sears stock price was trading about $6.37, give or take approximately. And if we look here over this trend between May and June of this year, you can see where it's lost a little bit of ground. It's had a few rebounds, one sharp spike on around the end of the day on May 24th. But otherwise, we've largely hovered between about $6.50 and $7. But it's come down even just within the last month since being somewhere around $7.50. Now, if we extend this trend back to July of 2016, you can see where we're at today on the far right. Pales in comparison to the nearly $17 a share from July of 16, so just a little less than a year ago. Now, if we go back even further and we go back to 2012, you can see that we had stock prices somewhere around the 60s were fairly routine. Go back even farther, going back to 2007, and you had a peak stock price somewhere around $160. And you look at the far right and you can see just how far the Sears stock has crashed by comparison to 2007. So if you look at several other related retail brands, if we look at Macy's, now since we got a slight mix here of NASDAQ and other stock prices here, what we're looking at here is basically a percent change from their base stock price, in this case here from July of 2011. So since July of 2011 to June of 2017, Sears has lost about 91% of its share value. On the other hand, Target is up 1%, Macy's has lost 24%, JCPenney is down 85%, and Bon-Ton, which is the parent for Bon-Ton, as well as Yonkers, Bergner's, and Carson Pirie Scott, or otherwise known as Carson's Furniture, they're down 95%. So Sears tanking in the retail segment here is not isolated by themselves. It's part of a larger trend nationwide that's going on. So to some extent, Sears is kind of following some trends, whether they like it or not, and has some company. So just for a quick comparison to the overall NASDAQ average, over the same duration of time, the NASDAQ average is actually grew by 124%. If we compare to the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the Dow Jones was up 73% over the same duration of time. And since my channel is primarily tools, a couple other brands for comparison, Home Depot and Lowe's, they were up, Home Depot 342%, Lowe's up 255%, whereas Sears was down 91%. So we're looking at from Home Depot to Sears in excess of a 400% difference in share price or change in share price. And that clearly shows that the health of the store is in some peril, but we're going to have to quantify this a little bit more. Another online retailer that gets a lot of praise is Amazon. They recently had their acquisition of Whole Foods that went public the other day. Amazon has also went up 356%. So there's definitely some growth in the online retail space. Amazon leading the way, most notably. And what does that mean for the significant shifts with the big box department stores that you might see at malls? Certainly, a lot of that mall traffic is going towards Amazon now, and so some of these more traditional legacy retailers are going to have to think about what can be done to change their retail strategy. So to get a little more geeky looking at the finance, this is just digging further into Google Finance. If we look at Sears Holdings and we look at the blue bars that you see in the graphs there, what we're seeing in blue is the revenue, and the orange bars that are below the zero line show the net income. So in other words, basically subtracting off their expenses. And then the red line shows their profit margin with the axis on the right side of the charts. And in all these cases here, you can see where this is actually getting worse, where revenue is going down, the operating income is getting more and more negative, and the operating margins are sinking. And if you look further down on this statement, you can see all the red numbers, and that'll be uncharacteristic of what we're going to compare it to. So if we look at Macy's, you can see Macy's has been able to hold their revenue relatively consistent. It's down a little bit. All the numbers are in the black. Their operating margins are declining a little bit. They've got some time to fix themselves. I know they went through some strategic store reorganization. Big thing, their numbers are all black. If we look at J.C. Penney, this is kind of interesting. Their revenue is relatively flat, but their net profit margin has been slowly increasing. They've had some periods where their net income has been negative, just like Sears. And you look on the rest of this balance sheet here, you see some negative numbers. But for J.C. Penney, there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel. Things are getting better, hopefully, for them. And so if we look at Sears, you look on the outside of the storefront, it's not uncommon for Sears to have a dated appearance. Unfortunately, with today's millennials that are very driven by what they see and what's flashy at the moment, old dated storefronts are not going to be appealing to today's younger generation and the amounts of disposable income that they have to spend in the retail marketplace. One of the things that I've always thought's been fancy about, or has been nice about Sears, is that almost all their locations, if you go around the outside, you can find a flagpole somewhere. Now, this photo doesn't quite do it justice, but it was interesting to see how this flag, when I took this photo, is actually kind of tattered at the end, which unfortunately is slightly emblematic of the balance sheets that we saw earlier for Sears. We go inside the store, and you walk around, and one of the things I think is interesting at some of these Sears stores is you can see some of the vestiges of their massive legacy retail presence. Many of these stores had portrait studios, hearing aid stations, optical eye exam places, glasses, the ability to get your taxes done, dental offices, hair studios, and just a whole assortment of professional services that you could basically track your entire life through Sears. Everything short of going to the doctor and buying a car and groceries. But if you consider buying groceries at a big K, then through Sears Holdings, they could theoretically cover almost all of your life's basic needs. And if you look over here to the left in this baby section here, you can see the absence of some of the merchandise. In this case here, the hearing aid and the optical is still there. The portrait studio is closed and is out of business. And at this time, you can see that when I took this picture, the courtesy rope was up, closing off the optical station, since its hours were different from the rest of the retail store hours. One of the Sears' other big areas of profit is bedding and mattresses. If you look at their Sears hometown stores, you look at their Sears outlet stores, you can clearly see that their big areas are tools, mattresses, and appliances. I think a lot of people don't think about Sears first when they think about mattresses. I know some of the older folks will, as opposed to thinking about all these very recently popped up bedding and mattress stores that we've seen trending, especially in the last, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years, that have just kind of spread like wildfire around the country. As is the case that we're seeing more and more, Sears is having trouble with its credit, and the ability of merchants wanting to actually sell to Sears out of fear they won't get paid. And we're seeing empty retail shelves. And that just bodes just a very negative vibe for the store and for what it means for the customer experience. Here, if we look at this aisle in the tool section, you can see what should have held a bunch of C3 Craftsman tools towards the center of the screen. You can see there's a vacuum, and I believe that's a jigsaw there, and a couple other tools just with the bare shelves, and a bunch of clearance tags trying to clear out all this merchandise. Now, in defense here of the C3 tools, since these are manufactured by TTI, which is essentially the parent company that manufactures Ryobi, and given that Ryobi is a competitor to Stanley Black & Decker, and there's been some lawsuit and legal battlings back and forth in the last month or so, it's fascinating to see how quickly the C3 line has almost disappeared. In all honesty, the C3 tools are very dated and actually in need of a refresh from Sears. So I'm glad to see them getting rid of it to maybe open the door that they can bring in a new line of updated power tools to be able to hopefully reinvigorate the Craftsman brand, or at least have a better tie-in between Craftsman and some of the other Stanley Black & Decker products. Now, you look at this kind of odd collection of products here. You've got your Craftsman C3, you got your DeWalt, kind of just all mismatched on the store shelf. Reality of what we're seeing today. Here, if we look at this aisle of these little tables that are about waist high, at one point you could find bandsaws and benchtop drill presses, benchtop sanders, and all that's left now on this is just a couple of miter saws, and then below it's all DeWalt miter saws, no Craftsman. There used to be the oscillating spindle sanders up there, the lathe. You name it, it was up there for benchtop tools, but it's just so bare and almost embarrassing to look at just how naked the store is. You look in the area of pliers and hand tools. I know there's been a big issue online lately about Western Forge and Sears. Western Forge being the OEM of many of the Made in America Craftsman pliers that have the black handle. They've been rolling out some newer Made in China pliers that have a red handle on them, and just seeing, again, more bare spots on store shelves just does not bode well for Sears and having customer confidence in the retail experience. You look around, other big gaps in the tool area lately have been in regards to their outdoor lawn and garden, particularly their sprayer and hose nozzle attachments and hoses. Those are quickly disappearing. It's interesting here, you can even still see some snowblowers sitting out and a big rack of snow shovels. In years past, all that would have been boxed up and put back in, or put that away in the merchandise pickup area and not been on display because there would have been so many other mowers and just other outdoor lawn and garden products that needed the retail space to sit out front and advertise for. But in the absence of having more products to put on display, they're having to fish through the inventory and show off some of their older or their other out-of-season products. I mean, in the middle of June, I'm not sure how many people are looking to buy a snowblower or a snow shovel, but hey, they're the only store in town that has them available right now. And the snowblowers aren't even on sale. That's the funny part. You can still see $11.69 on that price tag there, which is their supposedly full price for that quiet snowblower. If you're going to be selling a snowblower in June, maybe it should be on sale or actually on clearance. The signs nearby are in regards to the pressure washer and some of the other stuff there, but unfortunately don't apply to the snowblowers, which I thought was absolutely comical. Now, you look outside and you look around the Sears Auto Center. Sears has been closing a lot of these lately independent of their stores, and represents a substantial amount of square footage of the stores. And here you can also see an errant shopping cart just sitting in the parking lot. Sears has tried to add a little bit of reinvigoration to the brand by trying to roll out some Die-Hard tires. I'm not sure that's actually done any good. The Uniroyal tires that has also usually been associated with Sears has just not been marketed very well at all. And in all fairness, the marketing of the auto centers lately has seemed to be just extremely poor. And I've always thought it to be very precarious that you can bring your car to Sears to get fixed. You can buy tools at Sears to fix your own car, but you still can't buy most auto parts to finish the fix. at Sears. So then you end up going to some other place like O'Reilly or AutoZone to be able to buy the parts. And many of those stores are also now carrying tools anyway. So why are you going to Sears to start that? And I'll come back to this later when it comes to what it's going to take to save Sears. And I think the Sears Auto Care Center, or what's been rebranded in at least one case as a Die Hard Center, is actually a worthwhile way that Sears can add value to the retail experience. Because no one wants to sit around waiting for their car to get fixed. And the idea that you can go to the shopping mall and walk around and go to the food court and have a nice, comfortable place to be while your car is getting fixed, I think there's tremendous value there if this is done right. But clearly, Sears is missing the boat on what it's taking to be able to operate a successful auto center. So when we think about big box mall retail stores, Sears is not the only one that's offered tools, auto centers, or the like. Just digging through my dad's tool collection, my dad's got this older Powercraft router from Montgomery Ward. You younger watchers may not even know who Montgomery Ward is, but that's an older retail store chain that had a very legacy presence like Sears and is now completely defunct in the way that it used to be. The name and some of the intellectual property and trademarks associated with it did get sold and is basically being used for just some pitiful online retail marketing unrelated to the massive presence of what Montgomery Ward used to be, which included selling tools under the Powercraft name. In this case here, this is basically a rebrand Stanley Black & Decker router. I forget the model number off the top of my head. Much the same way that many of the Craftsman products are rebranded products from other brands. Now, another competitor out there, I showed you this name earlier, JCPenney. You notice here on this picture, the big banner out front of this store, now selling appliances. Well, one of the big profit centers for Sears has been Kenmore appliances and the related market for those, and Penny's is getting in the game. We've seen Penny's balance sheet starting to look a little bit better. So what does that mean for Sears? Well, that's kind of concerning. At one point, I actually used to have an auto center. In this store, it's still very present. And you can see the old entrance to the bays outside. When you walk around the inside of the store, it's basically non-existent. You can't even see where the bays were. They've got that area completely walled off. The lawn and garden, or the outdoor section that you see fenced in there, is also inaccessible from the inside. And so I tip my hat to Penny's for being able to completely close off that from the inside. But when you drive around the outside of at least this store, you can still see its presence. Just like K-Mart also used to have auto centers, and those have all been completely shut down as well as part of some of the makeover to K-Mart. And just like Montgomery Ward's, JCPenney also sold tools, sometimes under the Pencraft name. These are a set of 3 made in America ratchety wrenches. Just digging around through my dad's wrench collection. My dad's got a number of old JCPenney tools, and I think he liked them as much as he liked his Craftsman tools. And you can find very similar tools to this today. I'm not quite sure the warranty situation with JCPenney, but I'm pretty sure these are all sold with lifetime warranties. I understand that if my reading is correct, you actually could warranty these out at Penny's and bring in a receipt from another retailer selling a comparable product. Don't quote me on that, but I believe there's still some opportunities out there on that. But my point of showing these wrenches and talking about Penny's is that other brands or other retail stores have been through similar times, and in the case of Penny's, that resulted in the discontinuation of their lines of tools. Montgomery Ward's completely out of business, and so we can see the road that Sears is headed down if they're not careful, and what that means for tools, what that means for brand consolidation, and just a history of an iconic American brand. And this is where it gets sad. When we look at Kmart these days, I remember as a kid going to Kmart when they were an independent company, and just the excitement in my grandmother's eyes of thinking about a blue light, eating at the Kmart cafe. But you look at Kmart's today, and a lot of them look like this. They're just empty, derelict buildings. In this case, there's a fence around it. I think there might be some demolition coming up. You can see entrances to the old Kmart Auto Center here. And I went to another Kmart to get a couple more pictures here. This is what's theoretically their electronics section. Now, obviously, there's been big changes in the electronics space. I remember even buying a desktop computer. I think it was a Packard Bell from Sears back in the early 90s. and all that's gone, just with the massive changes in the electronic landscape. You're not going to Sears or going to Target to be able to buy computer software or buy the latest CDs or movies when you can stream that on Netflix or your music on Spotify, get it on YouTube, order TVs from or have a better TV shopping experience at say Best Buy. Now the one area of positive for Sears here is H.H. Gregg is now gone and went bankrupt and out of business. That's one company I never really cared for. I remember my first time ever in an H.H. Gregg, and I got harassed to open an H.H. Gregg credit card no less than 3 times, and they seemed very confused when I was insistent that I would only pay cash for a new washing and dryer, and they couldn't understand why I would not want to put it on a credit card. And if you watch my tool buying series, you'll understand I'm not a huge fan of using credit cards when I can avoid them. And H.H. Gregg, I thought, was just very disrespectful of that, which made me think that they were trying to leech off of those that are less financially savvy. Anyway, so back to Kmart. Kmart's trying their best, if you can say that, of trying to revive some of the lore of yesteryear of blue light specials and move around the store and announce a temporary surprise sale, if you will, on random products around the store. And if we go back to the tool section at Kmart, in this case here, you can see a lot of Stanley tools. It's got the characteristic yellow and black. With the acquisition of Craftsman, this actually makes sense. I get it. I think as a whole, most people consider Stanley to be a down market brand and not a premium brand like, say, DeWalt, which is still under the Stanley Black & Decker umbrella, or especially Proto or Mac, you would almost never expect to find that at Kmart, but Stanley, perfectly acceptable. I think you even find Stanley at Walmart, too. Now, the Craftsman brand is not non-existent at Kmart. It's there in limited quantities. And one of the things I do have to tip my hat to is there actually are a couple of very specific Kmart exclusive Craftsman products. And the most notable of which I think is the quarter inch or the inch and a quarter stainless steel 5-gallon 3-peak horsepower wet dry vac. There's a larger cousin of this vacuum that's sold exclusively at Sears. That's an inch and 7/8 on the pipe diameter, and I believe it's an 8-gallon vac and works great. I love the stainless steel vacuums. I know they're a little heavier, but this nice small compact one is one I would actually be tempted to buy if I was in the market for a wet dry vac. And that's available exclusively at Kmart. I think that's something that they've done right of trying to come up with some exclusive presences for the Craftsman brand in Kmart and differentiated itself from a full line Sears. In this case here, it definitely moves it down market. You've seen a lot more Craftsman Evolve tools at Kmart's, which is fine because that's where the Craftsman Evolve brand lies. One of the other things about Kmart that really makes me think it's dead is if you just walk around, I'm not sure I've been in a Kmart that looks like it's been remodeled since Ronald Reagan was in the White House. This goes straight down to even like the cash register terminals. I managed to get a photo of this one here the other day, and it was interesting. The screen was actually color, which surprised me. I expected it to still be black and green with the flashing green cursor, but you can see with the QWERTY keypad. And when I checked out buying just a couple simple items, the clerk had to hit way too many buttons to be efficient. The IT infrastructure supporting the consumer checkout experience just to be able to get the throughput of customers is not there. That the investments that need to be made just in something as basic as point of sale equipment is not being made inside of Kmart. And so now let me circle back to what can be done for Sears. And so I'm going to break up my strategy here, and I've got several fixes here, and I want to talk first about the financial issue. We saw in the financial statements I showed you before that Sears is definitely in a funk when it comes to its finances, and that's got to get turned around. And so I think, first of all, the divide and conquer strategy with Kmart of trying to have something that's a little bit down on the budget end to pair with the higher end Sears stores just is not working. The Kmart stores, I think, and this is just my opinion, is too far down market where there's no margin to be made to be able to actually keep the stores going, and the contraction rates and the need for remodel just brand wide across Sears is too far gone to be fixed. When you look at Walmart, Target, the growth of Meijer lately, Costco, and your shopping clubs, it's just getting out of hand. I have a tough time believing there's money to be made at the price point that Kmart tries to market and compete at. Now, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there's a couple small geographic areas of the U.S. that it might work, but I think by and large, we just have to come to the realization that Kmart is a dead brand. And I think the longer that Kmart stays open, the greater the risk it'll come to actually collapsing and taking down Sears as well. But I think that you've got both of them fighting for their lives, and Kmart, in my opinion, is too far gone to survive. Now, these Kmart, if we can completely close the Kmart stores, sell off the real estate, maybe the trademark can be sold off as well, and another investor can do something with it or hold it for a couple of years. Even Montgomery Ward in their bankruptcy was able to get some money just for the brand name of Montgomery Ward's, as well as the Ward's trademark, which again probably means nothing to today's millennials, but to those that are maybe in their mid 40s and over, might be able to have some cachet memory of shopping at Ward's when they were younger and a while back. And maybe Kmart could do something similar to that and just get an immediate influx of cash, not to mention the little shot in the arm that would come from the liquidation of the Kmart assets. But that's got to be careful that you don't, and because of the inventory overlap between Kmart and Sears, not to flood the market with too much inventory identical to Sears and the Kmart liquidation, that it actually undercuts what's being sold at Sears. So a strategic liquidation and elimination of the Kmart brand, I think, is completely warranted. It's sad. I am not happy to sit here and say that I think that's the best thing for Kmart, but I'd be lying if I didn't think that was actually the best strategy. So, number 2, vision. I think in order for Sears to be saved, what this is going to take is visionary leadership. We've got to be able to assess what's working, what's not working, and be able to think about where do we want to take the company. So first, one of the more recent pushes has been with the Shop Your Way program with the points. You give them your phone number, and there's this whole hocus pocus of trying to collect points, which I actually give them credit. I think there probably is some value to it, but it's so gimmicky at times. And the overlap between the Sears website, the Shop Your Way website is just incredible. And the Shop Your Way program is trying to bring in other competitors under the same Shop Your Way umbrella. And they try to and the Shop Your Way program tries to masquerade that Sears is only one piece of the puzzle when Sears really owns the whole thing. I don't think it's working. And I think Sears needs to do something more on its own so that its success is not dependent upon devaluing itself against its competitors. If I'm not mistaken, even Home Depot is part of the Shop Your Way program for some reason. I don't know why, because I think Home Depot is a strong enough company without it. And I don't know how many people looking for products from Home Depot would actually think to go, let's go to the Shop Your Way portal. And I don't even think most Sears shoppers, except for the most loyal people and longtime customers that are internet savvy, think about, hey, there's another avenue for searching for something at Sears, and the website might function a little better than the Sears website, and go to Shop Your Way. I know they just launched a new credit card, but I think the credit card scams and schemes are trying to profit off that. I'm just not a fan of that. Second part here, all these store closings going on year after year for the last several years has been sending the absolute wrong message to employees, shoppers, and investors. How much top retail talent is being retained by the Sears company right now? My speculation is none. If you're on Sears and you think you can get a better job elsewhere in the industry, I speculate a lot of those folks are getting out. How many college graduates are excited to work for Sears? Probably not many, because What's is it really a sinking ship, or is this going somewhere? There's been absolutely zero communication about what the future holds. And so what Sears really needs is a positive transformation to be able to bring the brand forward into the current century with a vision for what it can become, how it can become profitable, and where it can go and where its and where its position is in the market. And finally, to be able to tie this together, there's got to be some communication of this vision, starting with the executives and the board, all the way to the shareholders and to the public who have the dollars and cents to be able to shop at the stores. If you're trying to market products that have a lifetime warranty, such as Craftsman tools, but at the same point, the front page of your newspaper is that Sears might be closing, it's very reasonable to think that people are wondering, well, is that lifetime warranty actually worth anything? And why would I go there instead of going to, a Lowe's or a Home Depot where I can also find tools? But guess what? I can also find stuff to cut with them and not just the tools themselves. I can also get my screws, my fasteners, boards, lumber, and everything else I'm looking for at the same place. So why am I going to Sears in the first place? I think we know the answer for why Sears has been successful has been because it's a great family destination. If your kids need shoes and your spouse needs clothes, and you don't feel like, especially for guys, you don't feel like sitting around watching your spouse look on and try out new shoes at the mall, you can go and look at tools over at Sears and maybe you buy a couple, a new screwdriver, whatever it is. And the radial arm saw really has been a staple for the Sears brand, back all the way up to maybe the mid 90s. And the radial arm saw is falling out of popularity about the same rate the Sears has kind of fallen in the markets. So as we look into the future, as I mentioned with K-Mart, I think, and this is kind of the opposite, is that Sears needs to move up market and be able to market its products as premium products that command a premium price and therefore create profitability and positive revenue. This is going to need to be able to make it a creative and experiential destination. If you can have a deal where maybe there's some sort of Snapchat tie-in, better social media tie-ins, that there's something you can do tactile with your hands and your body in the store that you just don't get by flipping through with a thumb and a finger on a cell phone, is what's going to draw people into the stores. I think some of the in-store professional services might be a little dated. I'm not sure how many people anymore think about going to Sears for getting their taxes done or getting their portraits done. In fact, I think with the revolution in cameras, I'm just really not convinced that the Sears Portrait Studio has any business still being open. Now, I can't find any sheets that actually break that out specifically for its revenue stream, but I would think that'd be one piece of the puzzle that could be eliminated, and then free up that square footage for other opportunities for Sears to make more money. Their cosmetic experience, there's been a lot of talk in retail about Ulta Beauty and how that's very different than the traditional beauty supply chain. I know my mother used to work for a competitor to Sears at one point, and in talking with her, it seems like a lot of the major beauty brands, the white-coated ladies walking around the beauty product section at the malls tend to work for them, and there's a weird arrangement there that you only get to kind of try on or look at whatever they feel like getting out of the case for you as a consultant, but with today's younger generation wanting to be able to be in more control and touch and feel like Ulta Beauty has done, I think something's got to be thought about there. I know there's some legacy baggage that comes with that, but to be able to survive, these brands have to be able to figure out ways to do things differently and going into the future. I think there's also important to think about leveraging existing brands, and maybe there's some other product categories that need to be added to take advantage of the square footage. Some Sears stores I've been in have some areas of the store that have been kind of blocked off that are maybe only open for Christmas time, for trees and holiday shopping, or they're blocked off because they used to have the portrait studio, a dental office, or whatever it is, and they've just reduced the square footage of the store effectively by installing some temporary walls, but maybe that square footage could be used to actually sell more product. One of the things that comes to mind are building supplies. I know recently there's been some rollout of Craftsman paints and paint products. That's been in very few select stores, but if you could have a better rollout of that, of lumber, hardware, so that you got these tools that you're buying with a Craftsman name on them, but there's nothing there to actually do with them. I mean, with the exception, you can maybe buy a crib or some small bedding furniture and assemble that with a screwdriver. But if you could go to Sears and you could get, maybe some stuff like you might find at Rockler or something more specialized, and have some other building supplies that you could run and get, maybe like an Ace Hardware, where you can get just a lot of your tools, get some electrical supplies, like what you see at some of your Sears hardware outlets. Like the idea that you go to Sears to buy some tools and go somewhere else to buy the lumber and the rest of your building materials, I think is ludicrous, because Home Depot and Lowe's have grown dramatically, carry all those tools, and the idea of going to, quote, the lumber yard is kind of a dead concept. It used to be, lumber stores sold lumber and hardware and tool stores sold hardware and tools. And so Sears could get away with basically selling tools without the building supplies. I'm just not convinced that that's the case anymore. Like I mentioned before with the auto parts, you know, clearly there's actually parts in the auto centers for the technicians to use. Some of those do get delivered by other auto suppliers in town. But if you can buy the tools to repair your car, but you can't actually buy an alternator or a belt or a pulley or whatever it is from Sears, but you can buy the wrenches there. But guess what? If you go to O'Reilly or AutoZone or Advance, a lot of those also sell tools and the parts. So if you've got an auto part problem, why are you going to Sears? Because now you're making 2 stops instead of 1, and you haven't actually helped out the customer. I think Arts and Hobbies is another great place. Michael's has been growing quite a bit. It's related companies, such as Hobby Lobby. I've seen Hobby Lobby move into a handful of old abandoned K-Marts and just really thrive. There's definitely a market for the arts in the arts and hobbies area, and that also spills over to also be able to support the craftsman tools. That maybe you want to buy a scroll saw if you want to make a Pinewood Derby car and get some paints for that. Maybe do some sewing. I think there's also room for premium clothing. I don't know if it's quite like Nordstrom's level clothing, something exclusive to Sears. I've seen this roll out a little bit with the Craftsman line of clothes. I'm not sure that really counts. But what are ways that the clothing can move up market a little bit? I know my wife thinks the clothes there just look frumpy on her, and my wife refuses to shop there for clothing. She also thinks they're cheap and just kind of wear out too quickly. And so the image of their clothing is dated. I think that can be moved up market. And by moving up market, it's going to make it more profitable. And finally here, American-made products. For years and years, Sears was known as a destination for American-made tools. But just about all these tools are going overseas. Now there's a little bit of a cat and mouse game of how much of this is Sears doing and how much of this is Sears' hands being tied by the manufacturers taking the products overseas and their manufacturing operations overseas, whether Sears wants to or not, and how many, I guess, not so tool savvy customers just don't care, and the rest of us get stuck with Chinese or foreign made tools because so many just non-tool connoisseurs don't care and they just want the cheapest price. But I think about the acquisition of Stanley Black & Decker buying Craftsman. Well, I know Stanley Black & Decker has several Mac tool factories that make sockets and tools in the U.S. for their Mac tool brand. I think there's some definite synergy there to be able to generate American-made products that would seriously set apart Sears from others. I know a number of dyed-in-the-wool union members that absolutely despise using foreign-made tools. And if you can make them a destination for American-made tools and other American-made products and paraphernalia, I think that could be a very attractive marketing point. And I think the politics right now in our country would support that too. There is definitely a lot of nationalism. Whether that's good or bad, that's a whole separate discussion. But people, people's jobs and careers, matter, and being able to support your fellow Americans by buying products that they make, that helps to support various industries in America, helps to make America more independent and better able to handle itself on the global stage, and makes us less dependent on the rest of the world. I think there's some value there for what that means about just our geopolitical implications of that. And if Sears can help move the needle on that, well, they've got a history of doing that. And a lot of people left the Sears brand because of them leaving this. And if they can come back to it, I think there's something there for. So as we look into the future, this is going to require a comprehensive marketing strategy. We've seen Sears has discontinued their Sunday circulars and their online. Okay, I get it, it's cheaper, but you've got to put stuff in front of people's faces. They have done a great job recently of some targeted online advertisements. Got to give them credit where credit's due, but if you're not doing active spots, whether it's on radio or TV, in print, now they're sponsoring the World of Outlaws with the Craftsman brand, but there's got to be a bigger, comprehensive marketing strategy here. Existing stores, almost all these need some form of remodeling or another, and I'm not just talking about updating a bathroom, but just a substantial overhaul of existing stores. I'm not saying it's got to all be done at once, but if people see that these stores are getting transformed, it's going to get people excited about the brand because they see there's a future. And there's something to get excited about. Just that in-store experience. People like things that are new and different. And I think another way to continue that is to create the vibe is to find a couple strategic, maybe some old non-mall stores and reopen them if Sears still has the availability or the potential to do it. From what was shuttered and reopened, there could be a ton of positive publicity from that, combined with a comprehensive marketing strategy. And if Kmart's out of business, if there's any overlap in those markets there, you could shift some of that inventory over to the new Sears store, get some positive publicity about Sears reopening, jobs being created, lots of great opportunity here, to reopen a few, and maybe a couple mall stores, but I think some non-mall stores might be a quicker bang for the buck. And we've got to be able to generate some form of an in-store experience. Why do people want to come into Sears? It's not just because they can find the cheapest price on anything, but there's more to the experience. And if you look at some of like Joann Fabrics, they've got a lot of classes that people can take. So then they end up buying sewing machines and fabric and thread and so on. And I think that works. We've seen Home Depot and Lowe's at different locations will do some classes to get people to come in. Talked about sewing. If you're selling tools, maybe some crash course on how to use the tools would be easy to do. Believe it or not, I've met a number of wives that wish their husbands were more handy with tools, and I could easily see a great Father's Day present of, hey, here's a 3-week class at Sears on how to use a drill around the house. I know it sounds kind of stupid, or how to change your tires, or how to do a spark plug change, or whatever it is, and do it hands-on. Sell the class, sell the experience, use the real estate to be able to generate these professional experiences. And that might mean demonstrations. Like if you've ever been to a state fair or a county fair, you'll see some amazing marketing people putting on demos all day that are interactive. Well, let's bring that in store and, have that on special occasions. Come in store this weekend and so will be there demonstrating whatever it is. Maybe there's some other traveling exhibitions that can be brought in. Certain brands will have special, basically specially outfitted tractor trailers that create a complete experience for that brand that could be brought in and travel around the country, again, to create that desire to actually get to the store and get away from your phone to be able to generate that positive retail experience. Cooking. Where do you go to find a cooking class these days? I don't know. But with the cooking supplies that's sold in the housewares department at Sears, just a basic kitchen, I don't think Sears needs to have groceries altogether, but maybe have a cooking class. That would help move other Sears products. And if you take some of these classes, maybe you get a small coupon that you could use for buying some other stuff from Sears. Again, to keep people in the store and to keep them buying products. That in-store experience, I think, can be the genesis of all of that. So as we continue going towards the future, one of the other big complaints I hear is all about the website. It doesn't work. It's broken. The online chat people are worthless and not knowledgeable. I think everyone, from what I can tell, is online that is on the same page that the website needs to be upgraded, changed, overhauled completely with a brand makeover. As we look at Amazon trying to really move towards the Amazon Prime again in 2 days, well, with the Sears distribution network and stores, if you can click and buy it and get it in store now, or go pick up in an hour, they've already doing this on their website. I'm not sure it works well for everyone. I've actually had a positive experience with it, and it works well for me most of the time, but I'm not sure the inventory is updated as quickly as it should be online to really make this as fluid and continuous as possible. But the ability to be able to have a bunch of maybe extra products that are in the back in the merchandise pickup area, pick it up and go. I think there's a lot of value that could be made there, to be able to compete against the Amazons of the world. And I mentioned this before at the Shop Your Way. Some of these gimmicks, like I think about the Craftsman stool, there's several different so-called sale prices. The real absolute bottom dollar sale price is $49.99, but sometimes you'll see it on sale for $59, $69, $79. I think retail price is like maybe $99 or $129 theoretically, but the real true bottom dollar sale price is $49. And so if you follow products long enough, you can find what their real bottom dollar price is, make it into a complete gimmick, and it's not worthwhile just going in and buying if you can figure out what their strategy is, and it's kind of gimmicky. If we think about some other model stores or mentor stores, there's definitely a few out there I think that come to mind. The first three here, Home Depot, Lowe's, and Menards. I think these are obvious for the tool folks, but these also includes a lot of home decoration and home supplies, and we've seen them clearly grow in the market. Menards is privately held, by the way, so there is no market data on Menards. I already mentioned Ulta Beauty. Scheels, which is sporting goods stores. You can also substitute in Dick's. Some Scheels stores have a lot of statues and interactive displays documenting local history and lore, and also bringing some of that into Sears could be good. From the arts and hobbies stores like Hobby Lobby and Joann Fabrics. My wife's favorite place to shop, White House Black Market. I think there's some value there. I'm not claiming to understand women's clothes, but I know my wife likes it, and a lot of her friends like shopping there, and so I think there's something there. As well as I think if there was some form of a unique in-store cafe, I think about like Borders or some other bookstores that have a Starbucks inside. But what are other ways to get people to be able to stay in the store and engaged inside that store activity and a store presence? We've seen K-Mart actually did that quite well with their cafes and restaurants that people would wait for the next blue light special. So again, there is some institutional history within the K-Mart side of the cafe inside, but I think a cafe at a Sears cannot be a Little Caesars Pizza. No offense to Little Caesars Pizza. It's actually not too bad, but it's not the kind of brand that you'd want in the store. You'd want something more upscale, more hip. I mean, it could be something like a Panera or create your own brand, but I think this would actually be a better case to partner with an existing brand and bring them in store so that you can come in, sip on a cup of coffee. Maybe someone's playing a piano in the store. Oddly enough, I've seen Menards stores that actually have like a pianist play in the on the weekends by their escalators. It's completely weird, but it works, and Menards does it, and Menards is thriving very well from as best I can tell as an outsider. Mentioning Menards, I think folks on the East and West Coast, for whatever reason, are pretty unfamiliar with Menards because it's mostly in the Midwest from Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, Missouri. I'm sure I'm Kansas, and I'm sure I'm missing a few other states. But Menards actually does a great job of selling the in-store experience and the big box retail, competing successfully against Lowe's and Home Depot. So one of the things that you can find at Menards, and you can see this on the screen here closely, is actually American-made tools. They hype this up every now and then, and I know some of these lines are getting phased out a little bit, I think, and replaced with some other ones, but you can find, here's American-made chisels, American-made sockets, American-made wrenches. Well, hot diggity, that's what people have been looking for Sears for years, and Menards has been doing it for a long time, and it's there. Oddly enough, with Menards, you can also find, because they somewhat dabble in the discount or the closeout range where they'll acquire a bunch of inventory. And when I was there the other day, they had a bunch of Craftsman bar and chain oil for chainsaws, as well as a bunch of Die Hard products were there. You're not going to find a lot of these on the Menards website, but you can find them in stores, or at least select stores. And I suspect that this is part of a Sears brand strategy to eliminate some SKUs and offer up some of the retail stock to stores like Menards. They'll be able to get some quick cash to put back in the stores and not devalue their inventory too much. Because Menards is not listed as an official distributor of Craftsman or Die Hard products, but you can find them there. Occasionally, I've seen more than just the bar and chain oil. I've seen some of the old Nextech tools. I've seen some of the old weed eaters that have shown up at Menards from time to time as part of a special buy or something to that effect that Menards will advertise. All right, now for step number 3, I really think it's time for new leadership within the Sears Holdings company. The current leadership, starting with the CEO and on down, from what I can tell and my perception, has done little to absolutely nothing to foster the long-term survivability of Sears. I think he's tried to set himself up for his personal long-term survivability, but not that of the brand. And if he is, his ability to stay on message with what that looks like in the future so far is non-existent. And if there is no communication, that vacuum that's created only creates fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that's not how a company can thrive. When there have been store closings and real estate sales and other transactions involving real estate, there's been no evidence that those short-term gains have been reinvested back into the company. And when you start if you skip that over, I'm thinking, I'm pretty certain that that's basically sowing seeds of defeat for their long-term survivability. There's, from what I can tell, and maybe I'm not understanding this right, but there's some conflicts of interest, from the best I understand it, between the way the CEO's interests in Sears are and some of his other real estate holdings that he owns, leasing stores back to Sears that would theoretically be able to take a tax loss if Sears went bankrupt and couldn't actually pay, where the company on his left hand can't pay the company in his right hand, and where he could be left pretty neutral, if not, or the hit on him would be minimal. And so I'm just concerned about the conflicts of interest going on at some of the top levels within the corporation. And are they making decisions actually fiduciarily in the best interest of the investor, in the best interest of the consumer, the employees, and everyone along the way? I'm just not certain of that. And finally, I really think that if there was a bullish and activist investor or an activist investor group, now would be the time for a hostile takeover of the board and to be able to foster a change in leadership, a change in direction, to right the ship. There might have to be some clawbacks, and I'm not sure the legal way to do that, to basically put all the holdings and all the key assets of Sears back under the Sears banner and not have them tied in under the CEO, where those are, for better or for worse, somewhat inseparable at the moment, and that those have to go together. Maybe there's a way under the SEC to be able to claw some of that back. But I think if I was sitting on a ton of cash and I had some good friends that were feeling bullish with me about this too, I think there's potential here. We've seen Penny starting to turn the corner. With the right vision, the right communication, I think Sears can be saved. Otherwise, I fear it's going to just turn into the Titanic. And we know how that movie ends. And, it's not pretty. So I really want to be optimistic about Sears. I want them to survive. I've got a lot of fond memories of them as a kid, going there with my dad, going there with my grandpa, buying tools. I remember the radial arm saw my dad bought at Sears, buying computers at Sears. I think my grandfather even had a farm wagon from Sears once upon a time. It's so much a part of American history that letting it die would just be it would just be really sad. It'd be a sad day in America for that. And I think the right person with the right vision can save the company, save the jobs, and move everything forward. And that's where I want them to go. I want to be bullish on Sears. So if you've got any other ideas, please leave them in the comments below. And I want to make this into, a dialogue about what can be done to save Sears. Let's stop being super negative about it. Let's be positive. What can we do to save the company? And so finally, I want to say thank you for sticking with me through this video. Especially if you made it this far, I think we're somewhere over an hour at this point. I want you to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you and have a great day.